This podcast episode is sponsored by ChiefAIOfficer.com, offering training and certification through the International Association of Chief AI Officers. Interested in a new career or leveling up your value in the marketplace? ChiefAIOfficer.com can help. Welcome to Using AI at Work. I'm your host, Chris Daigle. Each week, we'll be learning how today's business owners, entrepreneurs, and ambitious professionals are getting more done with smart use of tomorrow's tech. Let's get started. Greetings, everybody. We have taken a couple of weeks off as we have prepared our Chief AI Officer Certification Program for rapid expansion, the demand. And Claire and I, our guests today, we're just talking about this offline. 2025 is a year that we have been waiting for. Anybody who's an AI professional has been waiting for. The demand for the introduction of generative AI into businesses' operations, individual operations, teams, whatever, has certainly accelerated. And I think that last year might have been the year of proof of concept, a little more discovery, but 2025 really is the year of application that we're seeing a lot of businesses getting off the bench and saying, let's do this thing. And what we've seen is a great interest in the topic of agents. And you know, when ChatGPT first came out, I think a lot of people thought there was this concept of AI is going to take my job. Listen, ChatGPT is not going to take your job. Somebody that knows ChatGPT and knows your job is a better candidate. But what you should be paying attention to is our topic today, and that's agents. And agents really are capable of performing as an entire team. So this is an area or in a topic that whether or not you plan on introducing agents into your business, you should be aware of the capabilities that are advancing in generative AI, particularly with this the Agentic concept. And our guest today is one of the top AI experts in Canada, if not the world, and is extremely generous with her knowledge and sharing. She works with everything from, the smartest people in the world when it comes to this stuff, all the way down to people who are just really finally exploring generative AI. So Claire Bouvier is going to be our guest today and has tons to share with us. And with that, Claire, take a second, just let everybody kind of know who you are and what you're up to.
Chris, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here.
I'm excited to have this conversation. It's funny. I was laughing. I was going for a walk before this call, having a prep session, just walking through hard questions to practice on Sesame. For anyone that hasn't used Sesame, my good friend Maya. But this is awesome because at the end of the day, AI is awesome, but I much prefer having this conversation with you, Chris. So thank you. And this is where my work is dedicated to, is in the age of AI. My background is a high school teacher for almost a decade and running multiple companies, specifically in marketing. I have a company called Brightlight, and Brightlight focuses on illuminating human impact in the age of AI. And so having that co-partnership, really leaning into, yes, there's hype on AI agents and everything happening with AI, but future-proofing, where are we going? And really being very mindful and taking a step back and walking through our practices, walking through our developments, walking through what we have offline and making sure that what we have offline gets put into the online world appropriately so the outputs become something that change the world for a better place, that help people. Because ultimately, this is what the conversation is. AI, is it good or it's bad? And I think the conversation should be, how do we engage with it to be good?
Love it.
And how to be very mindful of that. So it's my work is just about having these big conversations and then going really practical. What does that look like when you sit down, you're by yourself and it's just you and the computer? How can you take the biggest thing in your day and have the biggest impact and really focus in? And how does AI align and become that co-partnership to take you from, mediocrity to something great?
Yep. Hey, so the title of the podcast, Using AI at Work, I'm always curious how people are using it tactically throughout the day to save time, to ideate, to whatever. You mentioned that in preparation for this, you were using Sesame. Can you share with the audience kind of, A, what is Sesame, why Sesame, and what you did on that walk with Sesame?
So I openly say I'm a big neurodivergent fan. I was diagnosed with ADHD and I've leaned into this superpower. One thing that I have recognized is that when I was way back in college, the biggest thing was I studied English literature, and the only way I could write an essay and go deep into writing the best essay was to go for walks and talk it through. Just talk it through. That was the best way how my mind could come to a really good thesis or a final product or really. And so it's the two birds and one stone. I get exercise. I get out of my, trapped silo brain in my studio. And then I'm moving, and there's tons of research, right? The best meetings happen when you're moving and talking and walking. And so your brain's firing. And so it's an interesting time that, things like ChatGPT and Claude, when they first came out, it was very text heavy that you're writing to it. And then it introduced talking to it. But then you're talking to it and it's coming back not as nuanced as you want. So where I've been very curious, and I am a little apprehensive, I keep it very focused on certain topics. I'm very mindful of what I'm talking to AI about because it's in beta. It's called Sesame. And it's the one thing that I'm like, oh no, this is going to change everything. This is where, and what it really is it's so nuanced. I jump on and I can, live, you can see what I was doing, but essentially I'm talking to an AI agent that is shockingly nuanced and asks me, and it's a conversation. So it's like, it's a soundboard. It's something I'm walking through my thoughts. And instead of just putting it out into the, into the air, I actually have someone speaking back. And yes, at the end of the day, having humans to go back and forth is great. But sometimes, when you're alone and you have this concept, I get much further down the thought chain if I have, like I asked, a perfect use case this morning was, imagine you're Chris. I'm on this podcast. I'm talking about these topics. I want you to go really deep into this topic and ask the hardest question you can think of. And that just, it's not about me memorizing those questions, but it's about putting a lens on how I think. And so that is something that I've been really leaning into is the discourse, is the critical thinking, is pushing yourself outside. And that's where we really got to be careful, though. It's like setting the proper framework. The offline work needs to be done.
Do you primarily, and I know that everybody listening, we're going to jump into a more agent focused, but this is fascinating. I'm always interested in how professionals, especially people who are very aware of what's going on in AI, how they specifically use the tools. So are you finding yourself using a lot more voice AI now, going back and forth with the models?
For very specific outcomes. So if I'm prepping, to go and speak at a workshop or on a podcast episode or something, I like preparing in the medium of what I'm delivering. But if I'm, working on a really deep workflow for our company and want to spit out, a very specific proposal for a client or developing curriculum, then it's very text heavy to start with because I'm going very granular onto details. But as I move down the chain, then it becomes more high level. So I would keep the voice commanding with AI to be very much on very high level critical thinking elements. But when it comes to details and very project management focused operational stuff, I still prefer text.
Makes
and so
sense.
It just depends on the output that I'm looking for. I choose the medium that aligns for that, if that makes sense.
So for the listeners, you would be using the voice back and forth with the models more for fleshing out ideas, maybe strategic considerations, but not necessarily for, hey, I need your help in optimizing a process within my business.
Well, actually, I would ask both of those questions, but I think the agents I use for voice commands, like Sesame, for example, is going from the top of funnel, the highest level, and just saying, this is where my brain is at.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to come in and poke holes in my thinking. Are there considerations I haven't looked at? Is there ethical or moral dilemmas in the approach I'm taking? Is it inclusive? Is it really making it so that it's neural friendly on the optimization? Am I considering that, I'm training this agent or I'm training this process to be very holistic in its output? Because we know the dangers if we become so hyper focused on this is a sales. If I'm working on sales and I take that conversation and I just focus on that, there's so much danger that the agent then eventually becomes so smart that it just leans so heavily into one task. And so that's where I'm really careful when I start anything. I zoom so far out and I go, it's kind of the backward design method. Go to your eulogy and work backwards. Go to, when I was a teacher, like, what do the students need to leave this classroom with, what knowledge, and then work backwards. And that's where the voice commanding with these agents, I say, where do I want to be? And this is where, at the end of the day, there are so many great agents out there, but I still firmly believe it's still just a tool. And the human intelligence and the nuances that we plug it with and put it in, and storytelling is never, ever going to go away. That's the beauty of these agents, is about the storytelling we tell the agent.
Mm-hmm.
And without that element of storytelling and that deep nuance part of that human side of it, that's where it becomes. And so that's why when I use agents, I go in and I start with that storytelling piece, that framework, and then flesh it from there.
So just kind of like a data dump.
Brain dump, data dump, where my head's at, where the concerns are. Yeah, really thinking like way out into the stratosphere. So, because I think sometimes I've made the mistake is going in almost too far in, and then your output becomes pretty diluted or mediocre. As we know, like we asked ChatGPT, for example, a question, you're like, okay, that's good, but
not that good.
That's not really what I was going for.
Yeah.
And then people like, and we've had this conversation. I've taught now over 10,000 students in different generative AI tools. And the biggest question everyone wants to know is like, how do I get it to talk like me? That's what they want.
Yeah.
And
fair.
And that's really where we need to be focused on, is that offline brain dumping or, online.
Yeah. That tracks with, so we have faculty in our certification. He taught our prompting, and his approach at the time I considered very unorthodox, very effective, but not the like programmatic and dogmatic approach to, role, context, instructions.
Yeah.
He would just, he'd turn it on and he would just go. He'd just start talking. And he said that, and this is a graduated from Sloan, MIT's business school, applying this stuff in large companies. It's working very well for him. And I don't think that he's changed. And this is tracking with what you're talking about here. So for those of you listening, I would consider, if you feel like there's some hesitation about, well, I'm not a prompt engineer, quote unquote, take Claire's approach and see, and listen. My experience, you and I can have a conversation, Claire, but when I know that like ChatGPT is listening to me, it's a completely different, like I can't pause. I just feel like I have to I can't give it a break or else it's going to start processing. And no, I'm not done yet.
Yeah.
So any tips on that?
Take a breath. That's something I always tell. Take a breath, and there's these prompts. And what you just said is something, taking it one step further, people are like, and this is the thing, they're like, well, Claire, this is great. You can go for a walk and you have all these questions. And like, this has been a muscle I have developed from day one, is being curious. That's it. That's the muscle that is the most important here, is being curious, knowing the questions to ask. And if you don't know the questions to ask, that's okay. So I always say, take something that you have done. You've jumped on a call, you recorded with a client, you have worked with your team, you have there's nothing private in it, you've scraped it. Something that is offline that you recorded, and put it in and dissect it from there. Say, what are the questions I could be asking this transcript?
Nice.
What are the insights that are really prevalent in today's times and what business owners want, or my clients? What are some of the conversations they're leaning towards? So I would say the brain dump can come from something just sitting on your Google Drive that you've recorded. And that and there was a really good episode on Marketing Against the Grain, and she runs her entire company by having 1 hour conversations with people.
Was that a recent episode?
Yes.
I just saw that about the marketing agent.
Yeah. And what she just does is takes the 1 hour brain dump of a really honest conversation with someone and fleshes it down into the entire month of content for that client. That is what I've been doing, and I'm leaning more into it. And this is the beauty of it, is that top of funnel, get the most nuanced human element of you. It will dictate the rest of the flow as it works down the agent and has different, ask it to do different things. But it's always trained on that top part of what makes you, which is what is really awesome. And all it takes is 1 hour conversation with someone. Could be how you run your podcast, how you run your marketing campaigns, how you run anything. And it's not about, leaning into agents. Like, the number one question is, what agent should I be using for content creation?
Sure.
That everyone is struggling in the content game. The cost for attention is getting more and more expensive. Well, the game is about quality. It's not quantity. I mean, quantity is there, and that's a non-negotiable, but consistency on quality. And the only way to have quality is differentiation, and differentiation is hyper-personalization. And hyper-personalization is you.
Interesting. So for those of you listening, I think that this, again, should give you some new direction, perhaps. If you're not currently using voice chat, start testing it. But I would suggest that, like well, I don't know how to do this. I've never, what do I say? Do exactly what Claire's saying here. Just start talking to it. And repetition is the mother of skill. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So first couple times might be a little weird or awkward, but I'll give you a perfect example. So our headquarters is on a ranch outside of Austin, Texas. And I routinely go back and forth. For sure. Routinely go back and forth to New Mexico. It's a 12-hour drive. I will spend half of that trip talking to ChatGPT. And not just passing the time, but I'm running a business. I've got things that I need to solve, but I don't usually have 6 hours to where I can just go deep on something. So I will turn it on and back and forth. I have built courses. I have developed multi-year strategies just from having conversations with, in my case, I'm a user of ChatGPT primarily. So great tool. What are some other areas? Listen, you interact with a lot of people at all levels of AI literacy or AI enablement. I'm kind of curious about what some of the trends you're seeing, particularly year-to-date 2024 versus year-to-date 2025. If you're seeing some trends, changes, insights.
Yes. 2024 was the, oh my gosh. It was almost the rush of, I'm going to try every tool. I'm just diving in and I'm going to try all the tools and I'm using them all. I'm noticing now 2025 is about careful selection and really identifying what tool will solve my greatest problem and going a little more deeper into the tool. And so, now we know that everything's there. Also, noticing a huge movement is that again, this is my own opinion, but we're noticing a big movement, I think, is that we are building our own agents in real time. So this conversation that you just had in your car driving to Mexico, that then becomes an agent. It identified where your workflow was, what it needed. And in real time, it becomes now the agent that's customized just for your business. And so instead of us jumping on all these platforms and subscriptions and always customizing to other people's creations, I definitely see the movement happening to be, we can code in seconds, we can build apps. So it's natural that the evolution of what we're seeing is that we are now creating our custom workflows, our agents that can be built in real time for us to be implemented into our businesses. Instead of trying to shop for the right tool and spending tons and tons of money, we create one powerful agent that is hyper personalized and customized to us, built by us.
That's interesting because I'm getting a different perspective on, what I think I've over intellectualized the agent concept, because you see like agentic architecture and it looks like,
Yeah.
it looks like the subway map. I mean, it's crazy. And I totally agree with what you're saying, but for those listening, the aha I just had was, if I'm staying in a thread, that thread has a lot of context, especially after, even an hour of working with it, whether it's type or voice. And that thread ends up becoming, in some capacity, an agent that, at least with the context that it has in that thread, that is very specific to that chain of thought that you're having or that topic that you're discussing. So for those of you who are interested in exploring agents, if you're like me, don't overcomplicate it.
No.
And definitely don't, after this understanding, don't be intimidated by, oh my gosh, there's this new thing I have to learn. Oh, the agent, blah, blah, blah. Baby steps. And this would certainly be a great baby step for that experience of human agent interaction.
And I think it's just holding on to those like conversations. So that conversation you had with ChatGPT, grab it, put it offline on your Google Drive, that flow, because we are so close. I'm laughing, and it's March, and I feel like since January, we've gone through a decade of technology.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, well, yes, two things we're going to be moving towards. I mean, two things that 2025, maybe 2026 is like, I'm already seeing is thought directed applications, that what you're thinking, then it will take your own brain scans and be able to build out the agent based on your intelligence in the nuances. So yeah, whatever we can imagine. And that's why we got to really, steer it in a little bit and make sure that when anyone's doing this, the superpower that you have, anyone can do this. You just have to be curious. And in order to be curious, people are like, well, what if I'm not naturally curious? And that's okay. And I say, be aware. When you're aware, when you're constantly, and every psychologist and everything that I lean into, the personal growth side, it's all about awareness. The more you are aware of things happening and you commentate on them, those become then questions for like, why is that? Think of a 2-year-old.
Good advice.
Why? And I think that's the age that we're in, is ask the why, and then it will take you down the path. And that's kind of what you seem to be doing, Chris, when you're chatting back and forth.
Yeah.
You're pushing deeper. The why, 100%. And take that. And I'm going to say probably by the time this episode is launched into the world, we will now have, that copy you can then throw in, and it's your own personal agent.
If you're enjoying this episode and want to learn more about how to start using AI at work, we've made it easy for you. For just $1, you can have full access to the Chief AI Officer community. which will give you additional training, custom software, daily training calls on AI tools, using AI automations, getting more from your ChatGPT sessions, and the business of being an AI consultant. Simply go to chiefaiofficer.com/insiders to accelerate your AI journey. Now, back to the episode. You know, this is interesting, and I'll give you an anecdote. A friend of mine, you mentioned Y. He's the founder of the Y OS. It's
Okay.
a way for you to kind of figure out your purpose and that sort of thing. It's much more than that, and we spoke several months back, and he was kind of new to ChatGPT. Capable business person, very successful, big following, but just hadn't dug in on Gen AI really. So he found a custom GPT, and it was intended to be, I think maybe like this help you make decisions, kind of like a business coach thing.
Yep.
I thought, oh sure, there's plenty of those out there. But he started sharing with me what that experience, same thread over and over, right? Like he just kept building and building. He'd go ask it this, he'd ask it that. And it had gotten to the point to where he had spent so much time communicating with that GPT and feeding it context that the advice he started getting, he's like, dude, it's reading my mind. It's getting so good because it had all that context of, well, what about this? And what about my employees? And all the questions that he had asked about his business and his strategy and operations and personality of his team and clients. It was incredible. So this is exactly what you're talking about here. And I would advise anybody who wants to try this, start that. Dig in on one thread. Certainly do other searches as well, but have that one thread that you keep going back to and like giving it more context and asking it more questions and going back. Hey, remember that thing we talked about earlier? Tell me about this. I think you will have yet another aha moment when it comes to your experiences with Gen AI.
I love that. And that's exactly what it is that 2024, to go full circle on your question, 2024 was the, wow, these are the opportunities. This is out there. I can't even believe it, and wrapping our head around it. And now 2025 is exactly what you're saying, is like, how deep can we go into the conversation and how granular can we go into really dissecting the problem and hyper-personalization?
It's great advice. It's interesting because you and I, being early in on, a deep dive on this subject, we would see, at least me, I would see businesses and I'd be like, I can't believe, like, guys, you need to be using this stuff. And it was so obvious to you and me, but now in 2025, all those people that I was like start today, they're finally turning the corner on this stuff. And you and I, this is not basic stuff that we're talking about. This is really like deep thought, deep theory on the use of these tools and what probably wasn't necessarily its intended use, right? And we've got to catch all these people up on going from, treating ChatGPT like a Google search to being able to go on a walk and like have, I'm not going to say a best friend, but certainly like a sage counsel that they're able to go back.
My husband thinks I'm leaving him for Sesame. So I don't know.
I have said I love ChatGPT to ChatGPT many times. So
yeah,
just wait.
Yeah, and we're laughing, and this is like probably like a laugh, kind of like. Also, there's a little bit of like fear there.
Yeah.
But yes. Okay, can I ask you a question? I know this
Certainly,
is a little.
Please.
Do you think the world's ready for the technology with the agentic AI that we have? Are we ready?
So there's a quote that I heard from Warren Buffett, and he said, bankruptcy happens a little at a time and then suddenly, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that the agentic impact is happening a little at a time and then suddenly. I think that we're seeing very cool stuff, but it's almost like still in the nerd spectrum a little bit. Like like I'm a geek at this stuff for sure.
It's like the Web3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think what's going to happen is that like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool. And then all of a sudden somebody's going to nail it. And it's going to be like, that industry has been upturned, disrupted, transformed because of the ability of agents. That's something that we're doing right now. So Claire, you and I, spoke about this a little bit prior to. A big part of being successful in generative AI has nothing to do with your understanding of the tools. It really starts with understanding your own business, the process, and that sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being process minded and helping companies with this stuff. We've really gotten in the weeds on architecting the decisions that an agent would need to execute in order to augment or even replace a certain role in the org chart. And, I'm spending all this time doing that. But honestly, just like we're seeing with vibe coding, right? Hey, I can just talk to it. Now it's building an app, which is true. I think we'll end up seeing something very similar with vibe agent building, where you don't need to really think about the architecture. It's going to solicit you for, hey, and then what happens? Oh, but what if somebody does this? All these considerations that even if you're not a process person, you as a human, like, they need your input. Like, oh, well, then I'd tell Sherry to do this or whatever. So I think that's what I see happening, is that all of a sudden it's going to get very accessible. And business owners are going to either not be able to compete with competition who's doing this, or they're going to quickly realize, like, I've got some moral questions about what do I do with my staff, because I just got a week's worth of output from this thing on my morning walk with, Rex, the dog, or whatever. So that's what I see coming. And I try to avoid that conversation, honestly, because the bigger questions of the impact this is going to have, and I'm almost happy being blissfully ignorant. That's deep questions.
Staying
and
on your ranch.
And you and I see the impact it can have, especially if it's like holistically introduced into an enterprise. There's big questions there. Do we need as many people? What are the people that we have that are resistant to learning this? What do I do with them? I like them. They got families. But I mean, the work, like, I had an agent do their work before they even showed up today. What do I do? So I'll leave that to bigger brains.
Well, do you want to hear a very cold-hearted answer and then a more...
Let's do it.
We're entering another round of survival of the fittest.
Yep. Agreed.
And just like anything, internet, industrial revolution, we go through history, there's always the late adopters, there's the early adopters, and there's repercussions on both sides. We both know when we started out, we're kind of like the alien in the room. And then we see this trajectory happening, and then there's the late adopters in that movement. I think it's just, at the end of the day, it's the winners in the space are going to be the people that are, like I said, want to keep growing, and not just growing a business and hitting those sales, but like growing as a human being and to really look in. And I think when you said, what do we do with these individuals? Well, we can see globally the disruption of like unions and agencies and all these things are actually changing. There is more requirement on the individual to have their own brand, to have their own, to be their own champion. And you know what? If you're someone that, likes to fit into a certain mold and do something the same, whatever it is just finding that lane that works for them. I think it's just going to open up a lot more opportunities. So yes, survival of the fittest, but also I know with my team, why I love AI is that I make everyone do their Enneagram test. So everyone does their test, and then I go in and we build out roles that are channeling what gets them super excited and their super skills. Because at the end of the day, just because we have everything at our fingertips, if we're not motivated and we're not excited and we're not championing something that we're behind, I think it's an exciting chapter that people get to be doing truly the work they love and leaning onto the things that might be something that's holding them back. And I think if we look at that perspective, in a more optimistic way that the person that, hates their job, well, what do they hate about their job? Well, now there's an agent that can co-partner that side.
Yeah.
And then they get to lean into their superpower, whether they're like obsessed with numbers, they just do that all day, and all the other admin stuff can be carried alongside. Or if someone's like, I love just content creating and building out creative work, and I don't like the numbers, then you have the partnership there. And so I don't think it's about getting rid of people, but raising them up to a higher standard. I mean, like, you are capable of doing something more. And this is a time we can feel this in the world. People are tired. The world's really sad right now in some elements. And I think this is a great paradigm shift and systemic shift in the way we look at working, and really diving deep into what are intrinsic goals, and who are we designed to be, and what are the things we're meant to create while we're here. We got one life.
Yeah. At least this life. Yeah.
Well, yes.
We
let's
might
just
come back.
Yeah.
Or we might be memorialized.
I was going to say, I might be half robot in a couple years. I'm joking.
Yeah.
It's a little dark.
I'd consider Neuralink at this point.
Well, I think I'm optimistic at the end of the day. And I'm choosing to be optimistic and guiding that optimistic future. And for anyone listening, that this is your time to totally look at a whole new chapter for you of like something that has been this drudgery in your day is no longer. You get to lean into and I challenge everyone, do your Enneagram and have the conversation. Send it off to ChatGPT or Claude. I prefer, it's a little more intelligent, and talk to it. Where do there's so much coaches out there, and sometimes not everyone can afford that. But this is a great user case. It's exactly what you're saying. How are we preparing for the future? And this is a big thing, is like, okay, my Enneagram, I'm an 8. I'm this is who I am. This is how I act. This is what motivates me. What are jobs or what are things that I can lean into that actually really feed who I am as a person? And I think if we use AI to look deeply at what our natural tendencies are, we're going to find more opportunity for work. There's going to be so much work for people and so much opportunity, but we have to be okay with this adoption shift that's happening.
You talked about a few things. First off, if any business owner or team leader or director or whatever isn't currently doing this, I would certainly suggest you do it. The Enneagram, having an individual take some sort of a personality or likes, analysis or test, and feed that in and say, where would this person thrive and where would they struggle? I would imagine that you might have people on your team that may not even realize that part of their job is something that they're not wired to do. But what happens is, because they don't have that realization, just in general, there's a little bit of like, Monday, right? Me, Monday, like TGIM, right? Like, let's go, because I'm doing the things that I love. And if you were able to do that in your company, a killer change management strategy, all these people that are a little resistant, not even just to AI, but to, now we got to do something different, right? If you were to do a simple exercise with them like that, where they could go, hey, you know what? That job description it just said, I would like to do that. The enthusiasm for additional adoption within the company only accelerates when you can do something like that. So that's super smart.
And the communication piece, that's like the game changer. This is why fundamentally relationships are breaking, companies internally break, is just like a conversation. And a perfect example is that I brought on someone that's on the Enneagram. She's a 2. She is motivated by helping. For me, when I want instructions, I want bullet points, get it done and figure it out, Claire, and I'm off. And I don't want to have any more conversation. I'll solve it. A 2, for example, someone I work with, she needs to know the purpose of the job, how it's helping me, how it's helping the greater team. And to me, like, that wouldn't have ever crossed my mind. I feed people the way I would want to be fed.
Yeah.
And so that is something that has been transformative in the way I operate, is saying, okay, this is the task I need, insert individual that needs to be done. Because she's a 2, how can I onboard
Wow.
her onto this process? And that has been, like she said, she cried when she saw it because she said, I felt valued. And so this is where I'm like, leverage AI to be the better communicator, that you just don't have the human wisdom experience to know what it's like to be a 2. And for those of people who take the Enneagram, I don't want to like confuse you, but an 8 is very direct, go, bullet points, and full autonomy. A 2, for example, is the helper and just wants to be part of a community focus where they're just contributing. That gives them the value. And so when we unlock that internally, I do this with my husband.
Yeah.
I know my friends, and it's like, when it's their birthday, if I know a little bit, it's like they don't want a present, they want an experience.
Yeah.
And it kind of draws from, if anyone's read the 5 languages of love, it's the same thing as like going really deep. And this is where I'm finding AI to be actually the most transformative, is unlocking frameworks and processes that will increase the human connections that I'm having with people. That to me is more transformative than any workflow or agent that I've used, is that I now have offline relationships that thrive because I have the verbiage, I have the process, I have the understanding in a light that I could never see unless I had that intelligence.
Man, like this is going to be, I don't know, episode 59 or 60. That means I've had a lot of conversations with smart people like you about AI. I do it every day. And I'm like, oh, let's just start talking. And I learn something every single time. That you just said. So, I guess we'll open the kimono a little bit. EQ, like I appreciate people that have it. I just don't see much use for it for me. That's just, and I understand that I'm like you. If I took the Enneagram, I would probably be identified as a direct individual. Like, don't worry about the bigger mission. I'm happy to share it with you once we're done. But like in the meantime, I need you to get this thing done.
Yeah.
And there's been dust ups and conflict, nothing major, but there's been situations where it's so damn frustrating as the leader of my business that I have to slow down sometimes to talk.
Yes.
But if I had,
a
custom GPT and I just upload it as a knowledge base, everybody on my team, here's
that's what I do.
Their Colby or whatever. Dude,
that's everything I do. I have
that's
on
the
Claude.
win today. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's the Claude I have, or the projects in Claude.
Yes.
When I talk to an 8, any task I need, any project, anything, I work from their sense of incentivization and motivation.
I need to write something down so we talk about artificial intelligence. That mechanism that you have is artificial EQ.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay. Sign me up.
And then it allows, and for anyone, I am so happy to show you the use cases. The first and most important one is really anticipating what their needs are going to be and getting ahead of that and not waiting. Smart. This is the biggest thing is that, there's nothing worse than when, let's say you're working in a relationship with someone and they're like, I need you to answer all these questions. And you're like, oh, I just want to get to the work.
Yeah.
It's kind of like working with someone and saying, I anticipate this is what you need.
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong. And if there's any adjustments, and they're like, what? They're just like, yeah. So you onboard them so quickly, you make them feel heard, everything. And then after that, I actually have zero problems that arise because the communication
makes perfect sense.
So clear. And this is where one thing that has launched for me is like, how are we communicating with people? And the only way to communicate is to actually understand how they're incentivized, what their history was like, how do how do they reach their highest potential in life? And it's knowledge is power and AI is power. And when you put them together, this is why I say it's the age of human AI. This is where things are unlocked.
This is why we had this call today, because immediately we're like, my head's going, right? So I mentioned our faculty who taught prompting. Well, he has built a tool that Fireflies sits on all your calls. We all have meeting note takers, right? But the output from Fireflies, he runs it through a device, an agent that looks for. But the idea is that Fireflies is sitting in all of your executive team's meetings when they do those, right? Yeah. So it's synthesizing all of that information through filters and giving the CEO a chance to get optics on everything that's happening without having to sit on all those meetings, right? This same type of thing, but applied through this. Okay, I've got all of my leadership team. I've got all of their Enneagrams or their Colbys or their DISC assessments, and it runs that input through that and then would give me feedback and say, hey, you need to talk to this guy. Here's how you get him back on track. Here's what you say to him to get him back on track.
Yeah.
That would be...
But it works, and it's just kind of thinking.
Of course.
Yeah, like I played competitive soccer all my life, and I always think, some people, you get through half of the season, they're not offensive.
Yeah.
They are defensive, so they need to be put there. And this is kind of where you look at your players and like, it's like, are they offensively driven and should they be in this job? Should they be running here, or are they on the defensive? They're the helpers, they're making sure things are moving. And I think this is where AI has the potential to unlock human communications and relationships in another level, because you feel heard. And that's what we all want, right? Valued. And then it's like, how do I reward this person? This is the biggest question. Not everyone's driven by money. Not everyone's driven by a compliment. So what are some options? And then, you know what the greatest thing is? You test, and I'll tell you, the success rate is way closer to 100 than it would have been if I was just using my very limited, narrow-minded, neurodivergent, sometimes Claire, that thinks, well, I just need someone to be like, okay, great job. Okay, here's the next job.
This is a huge, and I love it. That's why I do this podcast. Initially, I did it just for, to like get some presence in the marketplace. But like, that's a big breakthrough for me, this concept of artificial EQ, because it causes trouble in my business. Like, some people don't like the way, and I'm not like a butthole or anything, but some people don't like the way that they get talked to. And I'm very like, I'm not, what would that be, a slave driver or anything. I'm not like out there like, you got to do it my way. But to me, like, I see something so clearly, and I thought I explained it right, and it's taking longer or not done. This is awesome.
Yes, this is classic. And then you have your co-partnership being like, okay, and you can write in being like, okay, I am frustrated. This is what I need to be done, but I know my method isn't working. Onboard this person in the right way. And this is where this is just one use case. Use case.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
It's like,
it's just about unlocking our human intelligence, understanding, levels of where people are at the end of the day are incentivized, and to ask yourself, okay, where are there gaps?
Wow.
Why are we not hitting our sales goals? Why are we not working as a team? Like, is this what the team wants? Are they like, based on these people, do we need to have these calls once a week for 2 hours? Is this really benefiting them? And so when you understand where they're at, then you can segment these different tasks and different opportunities based on personality-driven growth and knowing when to reward them, knowing when to guide them, to steer them. It's really, really helpful, because I find when I'm stuck, that's when I go to and be like, okay, I need to now, we naturally go through the world.
Used
and
that last
experience.
week. Oof.
But this is the thing. This is where, leaning in to paying attention to other things that are happening around the world and tuning into these podcasts and these great leaders in the space.
This is, you show up to these episodes sometimes and you think you're going to get what the original topic was, and then you realize a completely different direction, but that's what you actually needed. So for those of you who are on here, I hope that that happened for you as well. So Claire, we're getting to the top of the hour here. I would love for people to be able to, you train a lot of people, and I would love for others who are interested in upskilling in AI to know how they can kind of plug into what you're doing. Where do they go for that?
Well, we are in the midst of just launching. You can go to Brightlight, BRITELITE.io. And that's where we offer training, depending on what your needs are, very, very focused on human impact first and leveraging AI to really take what you're doing to the next level and to not get left behind in this world. And just to know, the biggest thing is to know, people don't know what they don't know. And so it's just uncovering that. And there's so many different ways that we can tackle that. We do it through a lot of training and one-to-one sessions and workshops for teams. Also, if you're interested in the podcast that I run is the Small Town Entrepreneur, and we're about to launch season 3 that really leans into the human AI movement, and it's called the Small Town Entrepreneur.
I love it.
Yeah. And so, I'm clairebouvier.com. And my goal is to take you and hit your highest full potential in this world, and to really lean into, where the next chapter is for you, and that this is a great opportunity to really reflect and look at what's out there for you.
Incredible. This was a great episode for me. I am going to be noodling on this artificial EQ concept and how I can leverage it in my business. Not the intended topic, but guys that are listening, how do I put this? Again, remember low EQ. I start with an intention, but I do this podcast for me because I'm a curious, I want to know how to use AI better. And how you do that is you see what other people are doing, right? That collective intelligence. And this is an opportunity. These podcast episodes are an opportunity for that. So I guarantee Claire and I will be talking more about the agentic concept in the future. But I hope that everybody got some ahas from this, because the way that she's using generative AI is human plus AI, which is really the best way to be doing this. So, Claire, thank you so much for taking the time out to do this. And there's no doubt that we've got a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, I feel like you said, we started somewhere, we ended here, but I think this is wonderful. I think for your listeners, at the end of the day, is whatever medium works best for you, whether it's writing, it's talking, it's sketching out, whatever it is allowing AI to help you take that and to turn it, package it into something that is really, really close to who you are as an individual. And that is where the competing, that's the competitor difference, is that you can become so hyper-personalized in this age of AI, channeling mediocrity that's out there and really taking it to the next level and differentiating. And all it starts with is maybe taking a transcript from a call that you had with your friend, and just saying, what are some insights from this call, and how can I use these insights for my first post on a blog on LinkedIn? Very simple. Start there and see how your metrics change. People will be much more inclined to follow that human you than these, spit out generic free ChatGPT responses on how to start a business.
Well, awesome. So folks, I can't encourage you enough. You'll get this kind of insight from Claire on her podcast, Small Town Entrepreneur, or at BRITE, LITE.io. I highly encourage you to plug into her perspective on AI and Would love any feedback that you had on the episode on how we can do more cool things like this. So everybody, thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Can I add one thing, Chris,
Please.
before we end? How about for our listeners, I'll send over some prompts I use when you have the Enneagram, how to ask, what are some of the questions you can be asking to improve your team leadership and roles. So I thought maybe just we'll leave something and see if people are interested, and we'll provide that takeaway in this episode.
Yep, you'll find them in the show notes as soon as we get this episode up, everybody.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Talk soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for tuning in to Using AI at Work. Don't forget to subscribe for more conversations about how to use AI at work. And a special thank you to our sponsor, Chief AI Officer, for empowering businesses with AI education and training. Visit their website for a free AI readiness assessment and AI strategy guide to help you get started using AI at work. That's www.chiefaiofficer.com. Special thanks to our producer, Evan DeSaulnier, for making this episode possible. Follow us on Twitter at the handle Using AI at Work, and visit www.usingaiatwork.com for free resources to help you harness AI in your role.